We will start with our moderator for this panel, Ms. Laila Al-Qatami, Managing Director of Sheikh Abdullah Al Salem Cultural Center. أهلا وسهلا فيكي. Our panelists, Dr. Tamara Chalabi. Dr. Chalabi is a curator, historian, and writer who specializes in contemporary Middle Eastern art and culture. In 2012, she co-founded the Ru'ya Foundation, an NGO she steers that is the only Iraqi organization focused on enriching contemporary culture. Ms. Raneem Zaki Farsi. Raneem, a Saudi curator and art advisor, co-founded AR Art Advisory, a multidisciplinary art advisory and curatorial platform in the kingdom, covering artist development, corporate and private collections, exhibitions, and public commissions. She believes that art and its infrastructures enable people to reach out and connect globally and as a community. Mr. Ali Khadra, a keen collector of contemporary art, Ali Khadra founded in 2003 the boutique publishing house Mixed Media Publishing and launched its flagship title, Canvas, the premier magazine for art and culture from the Arab world. 15 years later, Canvas became a major catalyst of the global art scene and is now complemented by Sorbet magazine. Khadra served as a regional consultant for Christie's, patron of Tate Modern, and sat on committees of various organizations. It's so good to have you with us. Dr. Ahmed Matar, Director of MISC Art Institute. Ahmed Matar is an artist, medical doctor, and cultural producer at the forefront of the region's cultural sector. He is a strong believer in the transformative and empowering potential of art education and strives to encourage exchange to promote a culture of awareness and acceptance. In this vein, he has significantly contributed to a more nuanced global understanding of contemporary Saudi Arabia. أهلا وسهلا فيكم and enjoy your panel.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Today we're discussing art. The past few years have witnessed enormous challenges in the Arab region. During such times, art is being used to express the struggles and dreams of generations, showing what we think is its true democratic nature. This panel will explore the ways in which Arab art and the Arab art market reflect these changes and study the role of contemporary art institutions. Are they places of cultural exchange? Are they inclusive? Do they promote peacemaking? Or are they mere galleries that cater to the taste of elites? So for the first question, do you think that art institutions are places of cultural exchange, inclusiveness, peacemaking, or are they just there to cater to the tastes of the elite? Or who do they cater to?
Well, I think art institutions are very important, but I think everyone in the Middle East is racing to build institutions, build the biggest museums in the Middle East, build collections. And the one thing that I wish art patrons and art collectors would do, first of all, I'd like to point out on one major point about the definition of a collector and a patron. I know that a collector is a person who buys art and who displays it in his or her home and institutions and probably in the store. And a patron is someone who buys art but also shows it to the public and shares it with the community and publishes books, etc. But today, in my opinion, collectors and patrons are both patrons. Everyone here actually in the audience is a patron. The fact that you've attended an art exhibition or that you've attended a talk or that you've visited an art studio or a museum or an art fair, you are a patron by contributing, by recognizing this art activity. But the one thing that collectors and patrons are not doing is art education. And this was a point that was discussed just earlier in the previous panel. So what's the point of launching all these museums and launching all these big institutions and these foundations if the community has no idea who Picasso is? They have never heard of a guy called Van Gogh, or let alone of a Middle Eastern artist called Ahmed Matar or Abdullah or etc., or an Iranian artist like Farhad Moshiri. It is very important to educate the youth first, and then we open the museums and the foundations come as step number 25. there's a lot to do before building these museums. This is one thing that I believe that the foundations and the patrons must do before opening their foundations.
On the flip side of that, though, there's also, the need to want to move forward and move on parallel tracks. So, what's the limitations of building, educating, and trying to foster cultural exchanges and inclusiveness all at the same time?
I think what Ali Khadra said is very, very important. I think he, rather than talk about the importance of the art institution, first he talk about the ecosystem itself. So building ecosystem doesn't mean we had to go to the final result of an art institution or museum. The idea of the museum now in the future, it's not anymore is like the dream. There is an idea to open the culture to everyone, to the home. The museum come from this like walls or closed wall to the life. So I think, like what Ali said, ecosystem is something important from the individual artist until the cultural policy. Which is this policy? We don't know. Every cultural policy or politics or anything in any country will have it. So very important that during this, between this and this, there is a lot of, steps and a lot of navigation or narrative will create it. And the most important thing is how to really make this culture as a public goods rather than a private goods. And that's a big issue now in every part of our world. Is the museum, is our dreams in this century? I think all of the big museums struggling now. People not anymore going to the museum like before. Museum it's not the fun place that I will go or the kids will go to anymore. They enjoy something else in their life. So I think big debate about a museum, about the institution. Are the institution ready for the next step or not? That's, I think, the big question that all of us has to raise and to be aware about it.
Yes, I fully agree with this. I think that as following on the last panel, which was quite animated and interesting, I think that there's a fundamental issue with the way that this region, and I would say that there are lots of differences. I mean, when you think of the Gulf, which is where most of the art market is, versus the Levant versus North Africa, etc. I mean, there are all these differences within this Arab region. A big issue remains, from my perspective, dealing with art, is one of, interestingly, image. I mean, it's about always this kind of grandiose scale of trying to build, impress the biggest, the largest, the first, the newest, etc. There's still a very superficial approach to the way that people are, whether they're collecting because they want to be on. I mean, and it goes back to, I think, the fundamental question of what is the role of the individual, introspection, all of these things which are much bigger than the story of an art market. But fundamentally, art education, and which is within the larger remit of education, I think is really, really important, because art is one of those areas where okay, I'm very passionate about it, but and I may argue that it's a very big catalyst to changing ideas, to opening up debates as a platform for freedom of expression, et cetera, et cetera. Others may not agree, may think it's a luxury, but fundamentally, because it deals with an individual. I mean, we love to talk about us as a people, there's always this collective dimension, or if it's not, it's about a national dimension. But fundamentally, when you talk about art, it's about the creation of something by somebody, and that something is very multifaceted, multimedia, and that something can be very powerful. I mean, fundamentally, it's an exchange between an artwork or an artist and a viewer, that spectator, that connection. I mean, it's what Emile talked about, that emotion that is triggered is very individual. It's also very unique. I mean, it is unique. And that's what's so powerful about art, is that it's able to touch in a way that maybe other mediums cannot so directly. But without a general knowledge, whether it's, I mean, not just, I agree with you, it's about Picasso and all of this stuff, but even more fundamental knowledge of local culture, local tradition, local, heritage. It's really hard to move forward without creating replicas, imitations, like a kind of a glorified level of mediocrity. I think it's a big issue here.
And what's really sad about this is that there is a lot of hunger.
Yeah.
So just now, a couple of days ago, Art Jameel Center opened in Dubai. I didn't have the privilege to attend it because I'm here, but I'll go see it tomorrow. However, I was following it on social media, and the majority of the attendees are the youth. So when you say elite, I think it depends on how you define the word elite. For me, the elite of the show and of the exhibitions and of the art fairs are the youth. So 90% of the people who attended Art Jameel a couple of days ago are all under 30. I should say under 40 because I'm in my 40s. But yeah, but they're all the youth. So to me, this is the elite. This is the wealth of the next generation of the art world. They're the hungry ones. They want to know more about it. And even when you go to art fairs or when you go to 2139 in Jeddah, you see the majority of the people are the youth. And I would like Raneem to discuss more about 2139 in Jeddah and the public.
Just to go back on the note of the museum, I feel like the role of it moving forward is a lot different than what it was. It's no longer just the owners of the treasures that they have. It's more of a role of like the custodian of the intellectual community now, and raising more, like it's looking at it from the angle of their public programs and their educational programs, and how they can actually reach to the mass where the culture is never autonomous. Culture is basically one kind of evolving from the relationships, from kind of integrating multi-cultures together into giving what you want to name as a culture for your own. So I feel like this role shift will kind of raise the stake to museums to kind of fill in that gap with these alternative programs, to kind of not make it boring anymore, not only make it reachable to the youth or to whomever we want to target other than the elite, to kind of make it engage the public in more channels. And pointing on 2139, 2139 is an annual event that takes place in Jeddah, initiated by the Saudi Art Council. It was more to create a platform in the kingdom that does two channels, basically raising awareness and promoting arts and culture in the kingdom, and kind of giving a gateway for international collectors, directors, curators, art enthusiasts in general, to kind of have a gateway into what's happening in the arts and cultural sector in the kingdom. And when we started, we were really fascinated by the turnout of, it wasn't the well-known names that we know in the art scene. There was a big wave of young patrons, young collectors, even from the families of the locals, that wanted to engage in this promotion, that wanted to take place, that wanted to feel like they're part of this initiative, where it took a huge shift on the direction of us actually putting this initiative together, where we thought, okay, then why not engage the public? And I think that is answering an alternative solution for raising art education. This is one way, putting them in the picture and allowing them to be part of this initiative, where they will feel the belonging to it, and then they will make sure that it's maintained, that it's sustained, which is another issue that we're going to come to.
So we're discussing education, we're discussing the role of museums. We're very fortunate here in Kuwait to have this beautiful Jabr al-Ahmed Cultural Center and also the Abdullah Salem Cultural Center. Thank you to the Emiri Diwan for creating these beautiful centers. So as we discuss the role of a center and we discuss the role of education, what do you think are the best strategies for incorporating youth so that they feel that these museums are their homes and they're a place for their expression and for a place that they feel like it's theirs?
Well, as I said earlier, I think one of the major roles that patrons can play is to be mentors as well, not just to help in education. It's great to publish books, it's great to buy art, to help the industry flourish, so to buy art from galleries, to buy art from artist studios directly, buy at auctions, but it's also very important to educate, and it's very important to be a mentor. I was very privileged and lucky to have one mentor who's with us here in the room actually, who took me to Art Basel for the first time. Now, I had absolutely no idea what an art fair was. I had no idea what a biennial is. And in order for me to understand, and I'm not talking about art education as in who is this person and who is this artist, and the Impressionist school and the postmodern school and the post-war. I'm not talking about that. This is the role of schools, but there's also another way. The gentleman before from Australia, forgive me, I forgot his name, Romy Howard. Exactly, he said we should change our mindset, we should change the way we think, and this is exactly what's required in the art industry as well. It is not only about pedagogy, about school, about educating who this artist is, but it's also about mentoring these people to understand how to appreciate a museum, how to appreciate a visit to the museum, what is an artist studio, and how to understand a biennial, how to bid at auctions. Today, they have to be part of this dynamics. I was very privileged to have this mentorship, and I think that patrons should play a role as well in helping the youth to understand how to become players in this market. Another thing that's very important is to give budgets. Governments today are building all these big museums and these large foundations and building collections, and we're talking multi-billion-dollar collections. What's very important also is to give budgets to a few select people in the community to start buying art, to start mentoring them into how to buy, how to collect, put the bug in them, and it is a bug, it becomes an addiction. It can ruin you, so be careful. But it's very important, like in my organization, a very, very, very small organization, what we did for our employees, we gave a budget of $10,000. It was a loan. It wasn't a budget that was given, so it was a loan. So the employee could buy art from any art fair they wish, and we would pay for the bill, and then they would pay by installment. All the staff have big art collections today. So this is a budget that we give them per year, and now they all have art collections. This is how you start the bug. And now they're telling their friends, and friends are telling their friends. So this is how the dynamics start. I think patrons should be mentors.
It's just, it's about the practice. It's not just the practice not being there, like having the mentorship for initiating for these practices to be there, but it's how you use these practices and how you actually utilize them, who takes charge of these practices, having that profession awareness of these roles within, whether you're buying or whether you're just a player in the market in general. The infrastructure, for instance, in the kingdom is not fully built yet. We have a lot of missing components, but everyone wears multiple hats in engaging with one another. Collaborations, coexistence to actually elevate and create as much as a platform as possible in order for the mechanism to start taking place. And Ahmed, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like all these entities, whether it's private, semi-governmental, or governmental, are realizing all these gaps that are there and are realizing their roles as whether as mentors or even as contributors or collaborators even into the market itself, or I wouldn't say market, the platform itself, to allow it to be open to the artists and to people who are in need to engage with the scene more.
I think regarding this, I will come back to the futuristic idea. I think community engagement is the real role of education. Community engagement is more important in our time today, if we're speaking especially about this idea of elite or not. Elite has many different meanings. Elite is a part of the society that have the elite because for economical part or scientific things, or why we call them elite, for example. This is the first. Second things, I think idea of community engagement is the things. How can we change the idea of museums to be a silent and make museum traveling to the people themselves rather than waiting for this old idea of having this closed wall. That's I think the future concept about cultural producers or cultural activities. One of the things that I'm not talking this because Takreem, but really what I like about Takreem, they start with the stock mind and it's travel every year in one location. For me, this is more interesting than have a hub or place which is like very static. Now, doesn't move. Moving, that means we learn a lot. We are in journey. Idea of journey usually is the most important thing. For museum to go to the people, this is also very important. And it could reach by many ideas. So how can museum or institution or cultural production, I don't know what I could call it in the future, but can create this kind of communication and engaged community in the right way. And I mean by community, everyone in the community. I think this is the big question.
I think a good example for that is Basma Al-Suleiman, when she realized the frustration of not being able to reach a good amount of public with her collection or with the knowledge, and so she took the initiative of creating a virtual museum, and it was a very brave and blunt movement where she created Basmoka. It's a virtual museum platform, and she started introducing it slowly to the Ministry of Education, to international audiences, and she has an international and local art collection, but it was a stepping stone into this building blocks of art education within the kingdom and internationally. So it was also a two-way stream, but this is maybe an example of how we can actually take the museum beyond the four walls and to a virtual world.
Yeah, but you're talking about, I mean, and I agree with everything you're saying, but I mean, dealing from a kind of a different angle of the not-for-profit world or countries, and I'm involved not just with Iraq, but with everything relating to art and conflict in general. I mean, this part of the world has witnessed a lot of instability, a lot of crisis. It's ongoing, and it's many different places, even Lebanon, where is going through, if you like, a renaissance at the moment, still struggles from, you know, the heritage of war. And I think that there is a huge assumption that people have, that the museum can even play a role when people can't even go out on the street, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think, because of safety, security, and so on, and I do think it's really important to look at these things in a more focused way and to see that there is a possibility as well to be able to engage with people who have lived through these experiences, who are living through them, who are creative people, artistic people who may have a chance to communicate what they're going through in a very powerful way on an international platform. And I think, again, it's about needing to, as was said earlier, change the mindset and think that it's not just about again, the kind of the traditional notion of the museum, the space, etc. And even with museums that I think can play a really fundamental role in terms of art education, and that is a huge field, and yet one can be really creative with that and be also mobile and travel and so on. But I think there's also a need to consider the fact that since we're talking about this region, you have a huge chunk of this region that's extremely unstable, and people in those instabilities that are silenced, except for the few that become kind of like showcases and are like being shown around, you know, Art Basel, you know, Miami, Basel and Hong Kong. I mean, it's I think an important platform. And while in Saudi Arabia you may be very lucky, in Kuwait and the Gulf, that you have a certain, you know, stability and money to be able to have, you know, national cultural policies that can engage and create places like MISC and so on and so forth, and in Art Dubai and so on. I mean, most of this region does not have that. Let's be realistic.
Usually the art and culture reflect the reality of people activities. That's why I will tell you, Iraq has amazing, and we stay amazing. For example, Lebanon, Egypt, all of these places is really, we learn, and we still learn from their practices. What I believe in, there is also danger of this museum becoming the propaganda style and controlled. Also, this is a big, big issue in many countries.
For you too.
That's what I am talking about. So that's, I say, how can this institution, and I don't want to say only museum, institutional or organizations shaped by the reality of voice of cultural practices or people who shape the culture in their country. This is more important than having the actual physical place. That's the main things. For me, I like small initiatives in many of countries that I really connected to, and I know that they build it right. Maybe they have very, very small resources, but I trust their product, especially the culture, the publication, everything that comes from them. So that's, and we have many examples around us. So I think this is very important.
But that needs support as well. What I'm saying is it needs support the same way that funding is being given to big institutions.
Yeah, so for example, in Beirut, for example, we'll say Ashkal Alwan, they have very little amount of support, but look how they create.
Yeah, but look how more they can do. Think about how more they can do.
Yeah, the struggle,
money.
It's much better to work for us, even everywhere, even in Saudi Arabia, there is a struggle everywhere. It's much better to work with the struggle and give this power more than be ready-made life or subject. So
let's look at the opposite side of that. So, art is always evolving, but what about, so when it's exhibited or featured in institutions or traveling around the world, does it affect its legitimacy, for example, on the street with people, with the artists who are creating the art? I mean, how does the community address those kinds of issues? Is it an issue?
Yeah, well, first of all, what is being bought for institutions, it's very sensitive actually, because I was part of some of the institutions, without naming names, when they launched the committees to build collections. And I was very privileged to be invited, and I was very happy to be part of this committee. However, I realized that everything that was being bought was, for the Middle Eastern collections I'm talking, was either destructions, homes being destroyed, or women being raped, or women in veils, or poverty, death. And then I pulled out because this wasn't about the Arab world. This is not what we're all about. And I told the committee at the time, I remember, we have this chance to be the platform for the international arena to see what we have as art practices and as talent. Why do we have to show all this negativity about the Middle East? And there's so much more beauty. So I pulled out, and this is one thing that I wish institutions can change their direction into. I mean, you're a curator, you probably have something to add about that. People often go to political art immediately. There's a lot more than just political art about the Middle East.
And I would add, I mean, one of the things that I think is really important is when you talk about art and conflict, is that, in fact, I think some of the most interesting work coming out of conflict zones doesn't have to be about death and misery and so on. It's also about life, survival, love. I mean, the incredible stories. And I think I'm more motivated by that than by the death and destruction, because we have, the general media, feeding us that daily. It's the fact that it's precisely this ecosystem of survival that is many, many different aspects of human life. And that's what I find often missing. And because, if I just may say, the dialogue, in my perception, has been driven from the beginning. I mean, it's part of a bigger story by the West, fundamentally. When you think of the Christie's that set up in the Middle East, when you think of all the auction houses, etc., I mean, there's a strong, and I mean, the art market, if you like, within the modern world was created, in the West, the gallery, etc., fine, and we are all influenced by that, and we are, to some large extent, affected by that because of the way the system is set up. But we also cater to that. I mean, there is a need to show death, misery, rape, violence, abused women, etc. And a lot of people are, also artists. It's not that we want to control the way what people communicate, but there's also one feeds that because it sells. And so how do you shift that as well? I mean, it's a big issue.
It's a story. The world loves a story, and politics is a story. So, beauty is also very important.
And you said something very important. You said because it sells. Whereas looking at it, back to your question, is it the value, or are you looking at the liquidity of the market? Are you actually looking at the artwork itself and how much it's cost, or its value, conceptual value, monetary value, etc.? Or are you looking at it, liquidity of the market, what its value now, to whom it can actually be sold to? Or is it, do we have the buyers for it? And does that drive the taste?
But it also sells, it's a generic, it sells, meaning it's attractive. It doesn't, yeah.
But in the acquisition kind of perspective.
But I think an equilibrium is the best. I'm not saying not to buy political art. I'm just saying a good equilibrium between the two in a collection is the best way to go.
Even for research, it's much better to have this equilibrium. Everyone wants to research about historical things, anthropology, beauty, sound, art, everything should be there. So we also, I think our rule also to open the door for everything.
If I may just say, one of the things that is interesting when you look at the way that especially Europe developed artistically after the Second World War, I mean, you have a very vibrant art market. It's ongoing. We have these, incredible stories of what happened of looted art, during the, Nazi period, etc. But one thing that was done was also to create all these different public platforms, such as Documenta, such as Manifesta, such as, non-for-profit art events that allow for that creativity, allow for that exploration that is not just dictated by the art market, where people go and get ideas, where they discover new people. I mean, this is something that could also be adapted in a more kind of general way in this region, I mean, as an approach, which, there's the Sharjah Art Biennale, which is wonderful, but I mean, more things that engage on a, if you like, on a more micro level as well. I mean, not just big names coming from other places.
How do you see the role of then the art patron or the art collector evolving to kind of meet these needs, or are their needs changing, or how do you view? So we've looked at the role of museums, and we've looked at the importance of education and youth. So what about the role of the collector, as you were discussing your experience working with collectors? What about the role of a patron? How do you see that?
Well, as I said earlier, the patron has to be a mentor. The patron has to promote education. The patron has to continue buying because we need their funding of the art market. And art is very intimidating as a subject. So when we want to welcome people, you want to welcome people into your home, you want to open your arms really wide, you want to welcome them, you want to cater to them. And this is exactly what the patrons should do when they go into an art fair or a biennial. And the scene changed a lot since 20 years ago. When I first entered in the art market, I would say 15 years ago, it was completely different than today. Today, we were searching for it, so we had to travel to enjoy it and to feed our souls with art. Today, art is available everywhere, all around us. So you look at the Middle East, 15 years ago, I remember there was only Sultan Gallery in Kuwait. I remember there was the Third Line Gallery in Dubai, right? And today, I think there are about maybe 4 or 5 galleries in Kuwait. There are over 30 galleries in Dubai alone. There are 2 art fairs, 1 biennial. It's a different network today. The collectors all know each other. The collections have thrived. Also, a very important point is how, in the beginning of this art situation, the buyers at Christie's and Sotheby's used to be predominantly Middle Eastern buyers. So 10 years ago at the auctions, you'd see the records of who buys, and all of them were Middle Eastern and Arab people. Today, 15 years later, there's 50% Western buyers and 50% Arab buyers, which is very important because what you said about the works being in institutions, people traveling to art fairs, even inviting the Western collectors over to the Middle East for them to witness and see what talents we have. This also is very important to elevate the market, but not only the market, but also educationally and institutionally.
And I think I'll take it from a patron's perspective. They play a crucial role in what you were saying, building the context itself rather than just the market. Like smaller initiatives, once you realize that, okay, whether it's because it's not part of the governmental agenda or it's not part of the country's priority at this time to actually include arts and culture, which was just a few years back, for instance, in the kingdom, where you had a lot of private initiatives from patrons of the art that dedicated, whether they're budgets or whether they're companies or so on, or initiatives, to actually engage with the sector, to elevate the platform, to actually build something for the community artistically. And I feel like that's the way where the top and bottom top approach will meet halfway and actually create a very perfect equation to move forward in building the art scene within the region, is that they play a crucial role in filling in the gaps that whether nationally you cannot actually get it from the government, or you think it's actually important, start on it, and then you'll start getting the recognition and support. But they're the initiators for actually meeting halfway and creating this platform.
I absolutely agree. I think that patrons can play a really important role as both in terms of innovators in the way that they channel their support and as initiators, I mean, there's so many different ways in which it can be done. I think one of the really challenging aspects for a lot of artists who may have incredible talent and may not have that exposure, that art education that we've been talking about, is also the way that they present themselves to the world. I mean, there's a format today in which you're supposed to function as an artist with your portfolio, with somewhat maybe certain access to English. I mean, there's so many barriers as well, which people don't think about. And I mean, we deal with a lot of artists who don't have all of that, and kind of we play a big role in how that develops. But it's a big challenge for a lot of artists who could have a very different trajectory and just don't have that exposure. What do you do about that?
That's an interesting question, and it takes us back to the role of mentorship. So, in all of your works, what are the kind of things that you do to encourage young artists or encourage people who, are struggling to express themselves? What are the things that you would say to them?
Well, if I can talk very briefly about my experience in publishing. So 15 years ago, when I started Canvas Magazine, everyone challenged me and everyone was sure that I'm going to shut down my business in a couple of months or maximum a year because there isn't enough talent. Ali, what are you doing? Who are these artists and what do they do? And it's something that reminded me actually yesterday when Ricardo presented the Kuwaiti chapter, and I thought, who's he going to present and who are these people who we're going to see on stage, getting these awards? And little did I know that we had so much wealth in talent and creativity in the Middle East. And thank you so much, Ricardo, and all the team for showing us this wealth of Arab talent. And it was exactly the same experience I had when I thought, wow, what wealth of Arab talent we have in the art world. So I started discovering artists, and bit by bit, first of all, I thought it was just going to be Islamic art. Our campus is going to be about Islamic art, prehistoric art, Mesopotamia, pharaonic. Little did I know that it was like the Kaf d'Ali Baba, like all this amazing talent was discovered. And then Christie started looking at what's being published in Canvas Magazine. Saudi Arabia started looking at what's being published. I started doing these dinners, so the network started being active. And then the word went out. And everybody in the US knew about Middle Eastern art, and everybody. So this is also mentorship. Mentorship doesn't only mean buying art, with money. Like, it's not always about money. It's also about education. It's also about promoting, about helping, mentorship. People often misunderstand the word being a patron or a collector. It's not always about, spending your money in art fairs. Many more ways can be practiced in order to promote Middle Eastern art.
Opening channels of dialogue. Channels of dialogue. And what I feel is very important, omitting intimidation. I think you were saying that art is so intimidating. It's so intimidating, and especially for these artists who do not know their way to reaching the right vendors or channels to actually move forward. I feel like opening channels of dialogue, and I have to give an example for an amazing initiative here in Kuwait, Nuqat Conference. They've done an amazing job in omitting the intimidation, bringing everyone together. With leading artists, emerging artists, creative designers in one platform, and putting them all together to engage with one another, to open these open dialogues. And that's what I feel like artists in the region, especially like from my expertise in Saudi, is that they are in immense need of dialogue. They just want to be heard. And so
curators are also patrons in a way. I remember, again, about 10, 15 years ago, a very good friend of mine, Hans Ulrich Obrist, who's a very important curator, did something called the Brutal Art Meeting in London. And I don't know if you know about it, the Brutal Art Meeting. So the Brutal Art Meeting is about a meeting at 3 a.m. in London in winter. So the first edition, he invited 10 people, and I was very happy to be one of them. So booked my ticket, flew from Dubai to London, and I went to the address. It was like a restaurant in London, a coffee shop. And I waited. It was in winter. It was freezing cold. I was outside and jet lagged. And then I waited for like 10, 15, 30 minutes. No one showed up. So I went back to my hotel and I slept. Woke up at 10 and sent a message to Hans. What happened? Where the hell is everybody? He said, Ali, it's next week. I was so excited. I flew all the way to London. And the next edition over 80 people showed up, just to show you dedication. So people need this mentorship. Even patrons, they can déclencher, they can trigger this art bug in people. And then there is a thirst, there is a hunger. People will come, people will attend. So this is also patronage.
Yeah, I mean, I deal with a lot of young artists who generally don't have access. I mean, that's the kind of what I do. And I find exactly, I mean, it's with anything else. It's about being heard. It's about dialogue. It's about being appreciated. And it's also, I mean, you mentor because obviously many, let's say, may not have had exposure, and you kind of allow that to happen through sharing, books, ideas, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I'll just give a little anecdotal example. I mean, I hope it will go somewhere, but, I'm working with a young woman who comes from not even a town, like a village near Babylon, Hella, in Iraq, and who creates these incredible sort of pseudo dolls that if you thought better, you thought she was copying Louise Bourgeois, but she doesn't even know who Louise Bourgeois is. And to get her, I mean, I was visiting a few weeks ago, and we had to have an entire negotiation with her parents to allow her to come with her dolls to Baghdad, because we have a small space where we're going to have an exhibition. And it was the first time she'd come to the capital of this, chaotic, war-torn, messy country. And her work was so, I mean, it's quite simplistic, but it's so powerful because, and we just had a little conversation, and she said to me, well, I'm not allowed to do anything. I want to be an actress, I'm not allowed to act, I'm not allowed to, I have to wear this thing on my head, I hate it, I'm not allowed, the only thing they allowed me, my parents, obviously, was to just go to school and come back. And this material was the only material available to me because my mother is a seamstress. But, she then wrote to me after this trip, and it's not about me, but she had to me, it was just another kind of experience. I was moved by the girl, etc. But, at the end of the day, it really made a huge difference for her. I mean, I hope it'll, be the beginning of something more. To be listened to be heard, to be given attention, to say, listen, what you're doing is valuable, there is interest in it, you could, and this is how you can develop it. I mean, it can be as simple as that.
So if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer questions.
Mr. Ali Khadra,
No.
I have to remind you that arts were in Alexandria, my city, since the 1950s, when Alexandria had a modern art museum in Muharram Bey. Maybe Dr. Ahmed Matar, if he studied in Alexandria, he knows these modern arts. Arts are going up, arts like cinema, theater, paints, museums go up with the economy. When the area were suffering during the last 10 years from the creative chaos or the destructive chaos, I say also arts went down because people priorities were to eat, to have dress, to send their kids to schools, to give them private lessons, because the teaching, even in our schools, I am speaking about Egypt, went down, so that my daughter, Dr. Manal, went to private lessons in pharmacy in our home to be a pharmacist when the economy was bad. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I fully agree with you that when the economy is down, a lot of things also budgets are cut. Art does not become a priority anymore, of course, and we feel that. However, it is also very important to note that currently we're all witnessing a bad economy, worldwide. We're all struggling from that. But as you can see in the Middle East, art is actually thriving. So it doesn't always get affected by the economy. If you see today, I mean, I've never seen in the past 5 years so many art institutions flourishing and so many art, I'm not saying the art market is good. If you got money, this is the right time to buy because the art market is down. But the institutions are flourishing. There's much more activity than before. People are attending a lot more art fairs. The numbers are going up. I think also art plays a role to alleviate the stress of the economy and a lot of other stresses from the, the market and.
I think the importance of integrating arts and culture into these entities, and they're starting to realize that, to diffuse out of the economy. Yeah.
الحقيقة أنه فعلا التفكير في الجانب الاقتصادي ودي أركز على نقطتين. النقطة الأولى شكرا لأنك فتحت مجال آخر مع الفن اللي هو الاقتصاد. من ضمن الأشياء اللي أنا أعجبتني في تكريم إني قابلت علماء فيزياء، أطباء، عالم اقتصاد، مبادر، إنسان مهتم في تطوير المدن. هذه الأشياء تجعل الفن أكثر غنى. هذه من النقاط المهمة اللي لازم ندع. دائما احنا حلقة الفنان عندنا مغلقة، دائما الفنانين في الفترة الأخيرة، فمفروض هذا يكون جزء انه ننفتح على كفنانين او حواراتنا الثقافية تنفتح على كل الجوانب الأخرى. هذه ضرورية. بالنسبة للاقتصاد صحيح كلامك، لكن في ردة فعل احنا ممكن نبادر فيها عكسية. كرياتيف ايكونومي مثلا في الأزمة الاقتصادية الأوروبية تقريبا كانت 2000 إذا أنا صحيح، كان 8 أيوه، كان من أهم عوامل العودة والنجاح كان الاعتماد على الكرياتيف ايكونومي اللي هو كون من الناتج المحلي GDP تقريبا الرابع، كان الترتيب الرابع في العودة. أعتقد أنه الرهان على الكرياتيف ايكونومي في الوطن العربي، وأتكلم عن الكرياتيف ايكونومي كل المجالات الثقافية، الفنية، الفكرية، الجيمز، الألعاب، كل ما له علاقة بالإنتاج الإبداعي الذهني ممكن يرتفع بالاقتصاد. إذن الاقتصاد يتبع الإبداع والإبداع يتبع الاقتصاد. هنا السؤال، أعتقد أنه نستطيع أن نصنع اقتصاد أفضل من فنوننا ومن إبداعنا. هذا الرأي.
I would like to, I'll give you an example. Lebanon, during the civil war. Lebanon is a country that has terrible government policy. It doesn't even have a government. It's sort of gone postmodern in its kind of, civic societal flourishing, if you like. It's a very interesting example because it's the absolute opposite of a lot of other countries in the region that are where everything is remains very state-driven, or that initiatives are created. I mean, it's good and bad, but I was a child, but during the war you had such an incredible, where you had none of the things that you mentioned. يعني ما كان في شيء إنه حرب وتقنيص ومشكلة. إنه you had a very lively and cultural scene on all levels. I'm not saying it's equivalent to today, but it was equally dynamic. So I think it's also about initiative, personal initiative, individual, societal initiative. It's not just, you did something fantastic by giving your daughter lessons in the home. I mean, you took that decision, you did that initiative, you probably made a huge sacrifice. But I'm saying, think of it also amongst other people. I mean, collectively, it can be just a community. It doesn't have to only be about kind of a state, where you're discussing kind of like the economic situation on a more mass level. I think there are many different ways that it can happen. And Lebanon is one example where I think things were very, very interesting and flourished. Ironically,
on that note, I have to give this example. Back in the 70s in Saudi, which was the peak of urban development, especially in the city of Jeddah, that was when the municipality decided to take charge of bringing in international sculptors and create the biggest open-air museum we have in the world, now holding, 700 sculptures, including César, Henry Moore, all of these international artists integrated with Miro, all of these many international artists integrated with local artists to do it. But the municipality didn't have the budget for everything. But what the mayor at that time was very passionate for the art. He went to the locals and the families of Jeddah and asked them to engage with him in this project, and asked them if they wanted to create beautification projects to divert the attention from what was going on with all this development and all these distractions that were happening around the city. And guess what? Everyone piled in, everyone contributed, and now it became a community initiative with the municipality, where now everyone feels like there's a sense of belonging. And a lot of the community took charge of it. Ahmed did a book about it. Christie's came. Abdullah Jamil restored. They created the sculpture park now about it. And now it's on everyone's radar, where this initiative actually took place back in the 70s. The community engaged with it, where no one at that time spent on art as much as they spend now. But then they believed in an initiative. They believed in, let's take a different channel to diffuse what's happening in the city. And a lot of people don't know that the actual locals are engaged in this project, which is the biggest project, artistic project in Jeddah. So, yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
الشخص اللي يروح يزور الارت وانا ابغى اتعلم بكون يعني اكون كولكترز ما في حد يهتم فيني كم اي ويل باي انا بحترم مع الاسف الشديد تحولت الارت فير والغيرها للشخص اللي يشتري للنخبه مش للشخص اللي رايح يتعلم اللي هو المجتمع. نحن مجتمع اللي اتكلم عن المجتمع الخليجي ما اتكلم عن المجتمع الثاني. المجتمع الخليجي عمره من 45 سنه. انا لما اسوي ثروه وابتدي اكون كولكتر اول ابني حياتي الاساسيه اللي هي التعليم والاقتصاد وتعرف الواحد وفره حق الاجيال اللي جايه. ما بيدفع لوحه قيمتها $50,000 ولا $100,000 ولا $200,000. لازم تعلمني على اساس انا اشتري هذا ان يكون واحد من الانفستمنت اللي انا يكون ثروه لعيالي في المستقبل. هذا مش موجود. انا اروح هناك اتبع مين اشترى هاللوحه انا بشتريها بدون ما يكون عندي نولج ولا معلومه. اكيد واحده من الاشياء كانفاس. يعني انا كان في مشكله مع كانفاس مره كنا في محاضرات لا لأن لازم فرصة لا كنت أتكلم كانفاس أنا أحترمها كثير وأحترم أستاذ علي خضرة وهو أول واحد غامر مثل ما تفضل حضر وأنا من الناس اللي بديت معاه المغامرة في شراء المجلة. قلت لهم كتبوها بالعربي يا أخي أنا ما أعرف إنجليزي. قال لي شو ردوا علي؟ قالوا إحنا ما نكتبها لك أنت نكتبها للغرب لأن نحن نبغى نسوق الفن الشرقي للغرب. بس أنا في حاجة إني أعرف الفنانين العرب. أنا في حاجة أعرف كل فنان موجود من هو وكيف يبتدي وكيف ينتهي. أنا مش مهم إني أروح الغرب وأنا العربية ما أعرف عن الفنان العربي. لا أحمد ناظر عرفته من ورا بنتي. يعني في ناس كثير عرفتها من ورا ناس. أنا ما أعرف. أنا كولكتر يعني أعتبر نفسي. بس شنو بالتجربة. ما حد مسك ايدي ووراني ما حد علمني. يعني انا تعلمت بنفسي بس في ناس غيري اجيال ما عندهم. يعني انا اعتقد الخطا وانا اتذكر قلت حق كانفاس قالوا لي بدل ما انا اكتب بالعربي اكتب بالاردو لان انتم مايورتي احنا اكثر. اللغه العربيه مش موجوده عندكم في دبي. اللغه الارديه الاردو اكثر ناس موجودين وهذا واحد منهم علي خضرة موجود. انا صاحبه موقف معاها يعني لان لو احترم اللغه العربيه كان سوري لان احنا منبر حر هنا والمفروض نتكلم يعني كنا بنتكلم عن المدن بعد كان عندنا اشياء كنا مع الاسف
تسمح لي اقول شهاده
اسلموا مني يعني
خذ الميكروفون.
تسمح
طبعا احنا نشكر ريكاردو لان احنا مع ريكاردو في ال10 سنين تعلمنا كثير اشياء. هو علمنا نتكلم هو علمنا نتحرر هو علمنا نفكر اصلا يعني وراء ريكاردو نحن وصلنا لهالمرحله يعني.
أحد المشاريع اللي نحن بنتبناها كمؤسسة هي ترجمة عنا series of books يعني سلسلة كتب اسمها الرؤيا نوت بوكس اللي هي ترجمة يعني كل فوليوم شو بيسموه كل فوليوم هو عبارة عن selection معينة من أدبيات إلى علاقة بالفن أو بالثقافة أو بالآخرين مترجمة للعربي لأنه في عندك عالم عربي كامل ما عنده access لهالنصوص لأنها منا مترجمة أو لأنه هن ما عندهم مثلا ما صار لهم يتعلموا إنجليزي أو يروحوا على مدارس بالغرب إلى آخره إلى آخره. وهيدي كتير موجودة ببلدان مثل مثلا سوريا والعراق وعدة بلدان بالمنطقة. بس مثلا لأعطيك وهيدا الكتاب موجود متوفر ومنوزعه ببلاش يعني مشروع خيري. نحن منعاني وهيدا كتاب ببلاش منعاني معاناة فظيعة إنه نوزع هيدا الكتاب بالعالم العربي لأنه التوزيع زفت. مثلا
بوزع لك اياه بيوم وليله بوزع لك اياه.
بعطيكي مثل يعني إنه هيدا إنه
لا مو حمام السلامة ما حقول شهادة يعني شهادة لصالح وضد. بالأمانة للأمانة كان اجتماع مع أستاذ علي خضرة قبل عدة أشهر جلس معي وقال لي شوف أحمد أبغى أعمل كانفاس بالعربي الآن. والله قالها لي مو قلتها والله يا وقلنا حقيقة لا الحقيقة إنه قال لي حكى لي حكاية جميلة. قال لي يا أحمد اللغة العربية شو علي أتذكرك بالكلام في نيويورك كنا مجتمعين، قال أبغاها بالعربي. أنا وصلت صار الناس كل الحين أبغى أرجع أكتبها بالعربي. قال لي كلمة مهمة، قال لي أحمد الإديتنج في العربي كمان الأيام هذه مو سهل، التعليم والمدارس ما عاد صار زي أول. وقعدنا نحكي في عدة مجلات، من أجمل المجلات في تاريخ الوطن العربي مجلة عيون، مجلة العربي في الكويت، أجمل مجلة. يا أنا لما أرجع لأعداد قديمة من مجلة العربي أو في مجلة عيون، إذا تعرفون لي من دار الساقي أو مجلات يمكن أنا قديمة عندي بعض أشياء أعرفها، لكن يا جماعة هذه المجلات كان وراها كتاب ونقاد وروائيين وشعراء جميلين جدا، كانوا يعيشون من هذا النتاج الإبداعي. هذا أعتقد أنه إحنا مفروض نشتغل عليه. أنا فنان ممكن ما أكون ناجح كبزنس، بس كم واحد موجود عندنا فاز بزنس، كم واحد فاز. خلونا نشترك كلنا. إذا مثلا ما نقدر ننجز، أنا رأيي أنا تعلمتها هذه السنة الأخيرة ولا قبل زيرو يعني، لا تعلمته ولسه ما أنجزت، أنه بعض المرات أكون عندي نتاج ابتداعي بس ما أقدر أحط خطة الاقتصادية اللي تنجحني، فأنا لازم أروح أدق الباب على هذا أو أروح لهذا وأسأل هذا كيف أقدر أخلي هذا بزنس حقيقي وناجح. يعني أتوقع أنه هذا رأي بعد مفتوح.
Thank you everyone. Thank you for joining us.